basic training end connections. Today we will be doing single end plates, standard end connections. For all our end connections we are using end plate 144. Very simple end plate to use, a lot of different options, very customizable. You'll notice that it looks exactly the same in the picture as the one from page 2, although the one on page 2 has significantly less options. It makes it a bit harder to customize, especially when it comes to notches and stuff. Therefore, always use page 1, end plate 144. Now, now that I've put in the first end plate, let's go look at the basic options. First options we have, of course, is on the first page of picture. Now, you've got stuff like the 2mm clearance. If you look at this from the top, just get a nice little view from the top here, make it transparent, you'll see that the plate is against the web. Now, on average we put a 2mm clearance there, give that a bit of space to get it in there between the other beams. Okay, now next we've got these two. What these do is they force the plate to be a certain distance from the top or the bottom of the steel. If I, for example, put in 40 here, then it doesn't really matter what the rest of the options say, it has to be 40 from the top. Just quickly set these, make life easier. Great, so you can use these to override any other controls you want, or for example, if you do not want to work out the distance between the bottom and the bottom bolt and the bottom of the beam, you can always just put your standard 6 in there and you know that it will be correct. Okay, as you can see there are two bolts but too far from each other. Just go back and start with bolts. Now, in a basic connection like this, where a 203 beam goes into a 406, we will be using two bolts with a distance of 70 and of course 35 from the bolt to the end of the plate. That gives us our standard end connection. Now, default settings, usually your bolt size is M20, but just to make sure that you do have the stuff correct, I would suggest to always fill in these. Make sure your bolt is the size you want it to be with the standard and the tolerance. Next, of course, is your cross centers. Now, the most used one will be a 90 cross centers with 30 to the sides. This will give you a plate with the width of 150. That's a standard end plate size. Good to use. It comes in flat bar, easier to fabricate. The other standard you will be using is a 70 cross centers, but that's usually only if it goes into a narrower flange, columns or stuff. Okay, so let's put that back on 90. Right. Next thing is the notch. Now, as you can see here, end plate 144 already has the notch parameters filled out. Makes it very easy to work with. We've got the 10 clearance up here, the 35 depth over here. Sometimes you will have to make this smaller to 25 it depends on the model you're working on. They usually tell you or give you some indication on what they need. Okay. The notch can also be used for other stuff, but we'll come to that a bit later. Now, let's go to haunch. You can, if needed, have extra plates at the top and at the bottom. I will also show this a bit later. Let's see, stiffeners. Doesn't apply to this one. And then, of course, plates. Plates, you'll be using a 10 thick plate. Remember that you will need to fill in the part marks to make sure that this mark here is correct. Okay. Once you've set up your settings, you can apply them, and to make life easy, just put them on all the other ones. I'm doing an area selection. There, it's been applied to all of them at the same time. Problem is, I don't want them all to be the same 2 bolts. I've got a vary of sizes here. 254. It's also 2 bolts. If you make it 3, you can see that the bottom bolt is too close. If you go and measure, you'll also see that it's less than the minimum recommended, and therefore it's only 2 bolts. The 305 is 3 bolts. The 305 is 4 bolts. And the 406 is 4 bolts. Now, as you can see here, I made these two the same size. If you look here at the bottom, you'll notice that it notches there as well. And the exact same thing if it's a lot bigger. Now, a 4.5 usually requires 5 bolts to be correct, but because it goes into a smaller member, you have to use that member's size to determine the amount of bolts. Now, a connection like this is not very strong. Your beam is not at its full strength. It cannot bear as much as it should. Load wise, that's weight. But it does happen sometimes that the engineer does this. Usually shouldn't be done, but if they do want it, do remember that the maximum amount of bolts is according to the smaller member, in this case the one that it goes into. Now, you'll have sometimes get these IPE. IPEs, if you look, they're just above the standard beams. They're basically a very light version of the beams. Now, because they're small, they usually only require 1 set of bolts for the 180. Standard 2 for the 200 IPE. Do note, if you do get something like a 140 or 100 IPE, 140 is still fine with 1 set at 70. 120, it's 1 at 60 down, and of course the 100 is 1 at 50 down. So for those very small ones, it's 1 bolt, 50 down. Basically the 2 smallest ones, it's just 1 in the center. As you can see, the notch is way too big for this size. Normally on something like this, you will have to use a smaller notch to get it to work. This is 25, this is smallest it can go. And of course, because it is small, your bolt size and of course your edge distances will decrease with everything else. I think this one's 25 and 25. make up for that lack of strength, it's always best to make this bottom full size so that it's got enough welding space. Okay, that's it for that odd one. Let's go back to a nice normal set of settings. Now, next important part here is channels. Now, you'll notice that my channel is no longer in the center but on its back. The channel's back is usually the same as a beam's center, and your stuff will be done according to the back of the channel. Unfortunately, the connections aren't really that smart to know that it's a channel. It still works it out from the center. So what you need to do is either take a measurement from the middle of the plate, which is there, to the back of the angle line, channel, gives you a measurement of 35, or if you look at the section size, it'll be half of the width. So the 70, that's 35. Now, if you go to bolts, you can just put the 35 in here. It's either a plus or a minus. It all depends on which side of the channel it happens. For example, even though it's minus on the one side, it will be positive on the other side. So always take that into account. One will be negative, one will be positive. It depends on the side of the channel. As you can see here, the yellow point indicates the start, the magenta point indicates the end of the beam. Doesn't matter what the channel is, if you put it in, those 2 points will be determining exactly which one's which. So the start point, which is now this side, will be the positive, and of course the end point is the negative. Very easy to remember. It doesn't matter if you don't remember it. I usually don't care. I just put in a positive, and if it doesn't work, change it to the negative. Okay, now, as I was saying before, on a 180 size, do remember it only requires one set of bolts. It's only from the 200 and up that 2 sets are required. Okay, now let's go and have a look at something that bolts into a column. The same principle applies. Very easy. You will of course use the column's width in order to determine the size across inches. If you beam goes into something that's a wee bit more, it's a narrow, something like this, a 90 will no longer suffice, and you will have to go smaller. That exact amount is of course determined by your red book, and you'll be able to find all the right information there. Okay, now normally on these main beams that go into the columns, you also want to make your plate full size. This makes it a bit stronger. Uses more plate though, but it can be helped. Now, a big problem that often occurs is sometimes you need to put bracings in, and for that you need to lengthen your plate. So to demonstrate that, I'm just quickly going to put something in. Let's see, channel will be fine. Just move this to influencing the plate, so make the edge a bit sharper. There you go. It has to connect to both. In such a case, we just get to the connection. In such a case, normally the gusset gets cut according to its pricing, just there. And in this case, that means I'll have to move this out, and the end plate will have to be extended by 196.66. We're just going to round that down. Firstly, let's increase the clearance to get it out of the plate's way. This should be enough. Nope. Okay, now let's go to our plate's shape. Remember, this is best if it's left on blank, gives the program a choice on what to do itself. If you wish to determine it, then you can measure and put in what you believe is correct. I'm going to round this down to 197. No reason to use fragmented numbers. Now, when you've got a situation like this, either at the top or at the bottom, let's make the situation at the bottom as well. I'm going to make this a wee bit smaller, but easier. And then of course, I have to remember to change whatever settings required, especially this here. Let's leave this blank, make it a square. Alright, now back to the plate. When having a situation like this, normally you would take your measurement from the top to the top of steel. From that you will deduct your 35 at the top. Let's just open up the calculator here, make this easy. Gives us 162. So my bolt is going to be minus 162 up. That's the first bolt here. I'll need to remove these two sixes because I want my bolt to determine the size of my plate. Now, from here to the top of steel, I've got 162. I also have this extra plate here. Now, this is the launch plate that I mentioned earlier. You can turn it off for now. It's not required for this specific connection. And indeed it is in the way. Now, let's say I want to leave this at 70, 92. That makes it, well, the easiest choice. Other choice, of course, would be to take this number, divide it in 2, see what I get. If it's more than 55 and less than 110, then it's fine. Try and work with even rounded numbers. It's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run. Okay, now that gives us that for the second bolt. Now unfortunately the third bolt will not be inside the flange here, so it's not going to be another 81 down. For this bolt it's going to be 81 plus 70. That's our standard from the top distance. It's 151. So next bolt is 151. Modify. There we go, and then from there we can continue on with normal bolts. Just going to put in a bunch here. See what I require. So 4 is 6, 6 bolts there. Now, if this was it, I'd have just closed this off at the bottom with a 6, and that would have been my connection. Now, since it's got a bracing at the bottom as well, we will need to extend this plate even further down. You have to remove this 6 so it's not in the way. Then take a measurement from the bottom bolt to the bottom of your beam. There you have to add 55. That is your standard length from your bottom of the beam to your first bolt at the lower end. So that means my next length here is going to be 117.3 plus 55. So let's see, because the calculator is much easier. 117 plus 55 gives us 172. 172 plus 3, no, 0.3 modified. Okay. Now, firstly, I'm going to go back up to a higher amount of bolts. Now, I said here it's 2 bolts at 70, but in actual case, this one will be 3. So 1, 2, 3, great. And it's that one. From there, let's say it's 70 again. Looks good. Now, usually you don't keep this one square. You can do the measurement, figure out the exact distance and all that. It's normally just easier to work according to what you set your beam as. Nice round number. It is still shaped. It's not as shaped as it could be, and it fits in nicely. Okay, that's that for this column. Let's put this over to the other side. Now, sometimes you'll get a standard end plate with a bit of a change to it. They want an extra bolt at the top and the bottom with stiffeners because there's going to be a lot of motion or torque on the structure that's going to cause it to vibrate or bend or move, whatever the case may be. For something like this, I'm just going to say let's make this 0 from the middle. Going to require 6 bolts, and I'm going to make them 150. Here, see where we get at 80. Good. So let's say 120. 3 at 80. And 20. Now, normally they will give you these types of dimensions. In this case, I'm just sucking something out of my thumb. Doesn't really matter what the distances is. If you look at something like this, in this case, you will want to have these extra plates here. Now, if they give you a length, great. If not, you might have to work it out. Stuff like this is normally, say, triangular, so the same amount up as it is sideways. In order to get that, let me just put the thicknesses in. This is 76, 76. I'm going to make all of these numbers 76. You remember to put in your marks. That gives us that. Now the inside, normally you keep it about 10, 15. It changes usually, but that's just to give the welding on the end plate some clearance. Makes it easier to fix the stuff. And then for the top, it's also going to be 76. What this does is it forces this plate to become triangular. Of course the corners are cut off, but very simple. easy to do. Same thing with the stiffeners. As soon as you put in a thickness, it will put in stiffener plates. There we go. Got some nice stiffeners here. Of course, you can control the width of these stiffeners, and you can do them individually. Have one side something and the other side something else. For example, you can put this far side at 0 and leave that stiffener out completely. Very customizable, easy to change, a lot of settings you can play with here. Another interesting setting is in the case of a sloping member. Let's just slope this member. This will of course require me to redo these small ones, but if you look here, stiffeners usually don't go at an angle. Try and put them straight, it's easier to make and to draw. There's a lot more settings you can play with. Same on plates, launch, notch. So there is a bunch of stuff that you can change if you want to. It's fairly simple. I would suggest playing around with it for a bit, just to get the hang of it. See what settings does what. Let's say notch it, notch it. These usually require it to go into something else or have some sort of intrusion. This stuff will be more or less with the double end plates. That we will be doing on the next video. Okay, now I think that should be it for this.